Hello and welcome to the CustomTools webinar. Today we talk how to maintain your CustomTools environment, and I expect this webinar to be about 30 minutes, and we will have the Q&A session at the end. There's probably some delay here, so post your questions as soon as something comes to your mind. This webinar is recorded and will be made publicly available via our YouTube channel as well. I will go quite fast and deep into some things, so remember that you can always go back to the video and check what I was babbling about. I am Simo Erkinheimo. I'm the product manager of CustomTools. My background is quite technical, well over a decade with CustomTools, and despite of the cool title, I'm still very much hands-on on the technical side of things because that's what I prefer. I should have pretty good know-how about all this, so don't be shy with the chat. Especially because my wingman at the webinar chat is our product director Tero Salonen, who definitely has an impressive history with all things related. So when it comes to maintaining your CustomTools environment, you want to keep it high performance, nice to use, backed up because servers can break, and you generally want to keep it in your hands, especially the more users you have. There are some things you can do easily just as a user or admin of the CustomTools environment, but then there are also some tech-savvy things you probably should learn about. The easy ones are those for which you don't need any specialized tools or know-how, like just dealing with common profile issues or cleaning badly indexed files from the database, and generally just managing users, their accesses and profile settings. Tech-savvy things are server and database related know-how, like where you should actually put your database, those backup and maintenance routines, and a little oddball there, this sessions table, which is especially meaningful for environments that have been used for a long time. Let's start with those common profile issues. So the top three ones are performance, performance, and performance. Yes. And then there's this quite obvious common case of properties being messed up. And the reason for all above is something you probably don't like to hear, and you just have too many properties. You might be basing your profile on our demo profile that probably has completely unnecessary things for your needs, or maybe your profile is just grown over time, having all sorts of legacy things and slow logic you really don't need anymore. And one more thing for the list is project management. Either using it extensively without really maintaining the projects list, or not utilizing it at all because you don't need projects management. Newsflash, you don't need to use it for projects. You can also use it to automate a set of properties and even target folder locations, for instance, for different component types. But let's now go for those performance and property pane issues first. So when do you know that you actually have too many properties? Well, it can be already kind of alarming situation when you see the properties appearing before the actions group, like in the picture here. So as you see from the picture, this is actually quite old bug report with many customer references, and we really haven't been able to do anything about it. When this situation happens, some of the properties might even stop working properly, possibly causing bad data being inserted into your models. And it's not trivial to calculate what is the allowed number of properties. Unfortunately, it even varies and behaves differently for different users. But the root cause comes from these numbers SolidWorks has set. So CustomTools properties is loaded into SolidWorks property manager pane, and we add our properties into that pane. One property is multiple controls. There's the modified button, label of the property, the actual control of the property, like edit box, and sometimes another button. So one CustomTools property can reserve up to 4 controls out of this pool of limitations. And it's when we hit these limits that things start to break differently for different users. There is also some arbitrary and very inconsistent height limitation, after which this issue can also happen, so possibly different display settings of different users might play a little role here as well. And CustomTools property pane has this feature that you can just select different components while the properties is open. So the CustomTools property pane has to be able to show part properties, assembly properties, cut list properties, and also drawing properties all in the same property manager pane. So all these scopes together affect not only the control amount limitation of your properties, but also performance of your properties. And here are some real-life cases of properties going broken that we know about. Judging by these numbers, I'd like to say that the root cause is the large amount of property group, at least for many. It's really hard to give a definitive safe amount. For instance, our demo profile has about 50 properties in 12 groups, and I have never seen that profile failing. So it's probably also a matter of how those properties have been spread among those groups. Still, the less you can reasonably get away with, the better. So here's a little wrap up of some actually working tips and tricks when it comes to your profile. First of all, get rid of all unnecessary properties, considering not only the model properties, but also drawing and cut list properties. Keep the property group count low. Don't do like unnecessary groups for the sake of having them grouped. If you need to be more descriptive for the user about some specific set of properties, then maybe revise the labels a bit or consider adding a tooltip. Then prefer hiding of properties over hiding of groups. So those groups are often created just for the convenience to hide and show different sets of properties, and such groups are often controlled by some property like item type. But you could as well have them all within the same group and use the property hiding feature exactly the same how would you do it with the groups. So this is much better performance and it takes less space, but of course it's slightly more tedious to configure. If you have some property that never needs to be visible, mark it hidden. Again, it's much better performance than those properties that are shown and hidden based on another property value. If you have, for instance, a hidden control property group, just get rid of that and write hidden to all of the labels and just enable the hidden option. And as a last tip, mass property can be slow. We use SolidWorks API to evaluate the mass, and especially for complex multibodies, it can be a very slow operation, which then slows down loading of the properties pane. Mass of the CustomTools properties is also re-evaluated every time you change the material using the CustomTools properties. So if that is slow operation for you, then it's very likely the getMass property is to blame. If the mass is not relevant in any CustomTools related operations, but you want to see it, for instance, in drawings, then just have it predefined in your part and assembly templates. There's no reason having that as a custom property. So that's all about properties. Let's check a few things we have for managing those projects. If you use projects extensively, it's not a performance issue from CustomTools perspective, but it can be very tedious and error prone from the user's perspective if there's basically zero management and a lot of projects. A few years ago, we introduced some important enhancements for this. For instance, you can now search the project just by typing here. And this was quite well received addition. But you shouldn't still forget managing those projects. And the best way to do that is by archiving the ones that you are not creating new designs anymore. When this feature was introduced, we also introduced possibility to reorder the project by simple drag and drop on this project list. So just keep it tidy. It's faster and nicer to use. So when a project is archived, you can still search them, use them, edit them, and so on, all of those designs. But what you cannot do is new designs for them. As said, CustomTools projects are basically nothing else than rules to apply some predefined properties and force file name and folder rules for those models. So if you don't want to add new files to some project folder or to some specific component type or category folder, you can safely just archive those projects. And you can always also unarchive. And notice how I'm trying to push the idea that you should utilize also folder automation. Sky is the limit how you can use that, and you can what you gain is clear rules for your components that the designer doesn't even have to follow because it's done for them automatically. So you might not do projects, but you probably have at least some sort of categorization and rules about the paths and file names for each category. And if not, maybe you should have. And by the way, this all works 100% whether or not you use PDM Professional or PDM Standard as well. And yes, we also use PDM serials in our folder automation rules. So that is also covered. So that was the common profile issues. Let's go for those bad search results. And why you should care? Well, whenever you save a file, CustomTools will add full path of that file to its database. All configurations of that file, all properties of all configurations of the file, and all references of all configurations of the file to its database, except if the file is saved into PDM Professional. Emphasis on Professional again, because we have tight integration with it, and we can use its database for our operations, but not with PDM Standard. Anyway, this is quite a lot of information that will expand your database in size. CustomTools database is hosted on Microsoft SQL Server, and if you haven't paid separately for it, it is very likely this free SQL Server Express Edition. And Express Edition has some limitations because, of course, high performance is sold separately. But Express Edition is a very valid choice for teams under, let's say, 5 CustomTools users. But between 5 to 10 users, you might already start to experience some worsened performance, even if your database is not full of bad data. The point is that when you have been using CustomTools for a long period of time, and even if you wouldn't care about having those bad search results, they will affect the overall performance due to these limitations. So you should definitely take a look what CustomTools has indexed for you, keeping to the database size and its RAM usage as low as possible. Now let's first prevent this bad data getting inserted in the first place to the database. So fairly recent addition to CustomTools features is indexed folders. If you have nothing defined, then everything is indexed, except for PDM Professional vaults. So this is the first thing that you want to define, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory, so we don't really need to use time on that. You can find this feature from under Database Options of CustomTools. Now let's use CustomTools search to clean the database. So if your data is supposed to be on a Z drive, then you can just find all of it using free search with the Z root folder as a search term. These are obviously the ones that you don't want to remove from the database. Instead, you can of course do a search for things that you don't want to be there. For instance, everything from the C drive. But if you need to be more explicit on your search terms, then go to your user options and disable the option to insert wildcard automatically to your search conditions. Also, you might want to at least temporarily increase the maximum search results, and flat view with single configuration weight makes most sense for this use case. But the wildcard option is the important one to be able to do searches like this. So the percentage is a wildcard, and because it's missing from the start, the search term is basically has to start with whatever it follows. And it follows with this really weird looking notation. Brackets and the accent mean not any of these characters within the brackets. So now it must not start with Z, which obviously means that give me everything that is not in my Z drive. Then we have the wildcard for basically anything, followed by the explicit users folder and another wildcard to get everything under there. Just an example, but this is the free search. So you can't be too vague on the search term because it can easily give you matches also based on property values and configuration names. Anyway, this gives you a little bit more control on the search. Just remember to switch the option back because in general the search is just much nicer to use when that option is on. So now we have some search results of those unwanted indexed files. First, reorder the list by file name so you can do a quick verification that the full file names really are what you were expected to get and what are the ones that you want to delete. Then multi-select a subset or everything in the list and do file operations delete file. And make sure this pretty dangerous option is not set. The option is there also for the reason that the users would realize that this delete file feature doesn't really delete your files unless you command it to do so. It only removes them from the database. In case the delete file button is disabled for you, then you don't have the delete design data database right. Which is a very good bridge to the next topic, user and access management. So CustomTools Administrator is the program you would use for CustomTools user and access management. The one user that always exists is admin using CustomTools login. Once logged in, you probably should change the default empty password as the first thing diving into user and access management. Next thing to know is that if you have done the installation using just default options, the Windows login is likely enabled, which means that when CustomTools is installed to a user who launches it for the first time, they will be prompted with this "Hello there, new user" greeting with name and everything pre-filled. And once they accept that, a new CustomTools user based on that Windows login account is created. But notice that if you haven't changed the defaults, that user will also be assigned to the admins group, which probably doesn't sound good because admins can generally do whatever they want. The reason is this group assignment settings in the defaults for new Windows users. And notice, by the way, this option to disable creation of new users, just so that you have the environment under your control. You probably should disable it unless you expect to get new users. If you have a new environment, then it's also a good idea to check the user options here, because you cannot control them collectively after the users have been created. Now let's go with the assumption that you have gone all defaults and all your users are in the admins group. Obviously start by removing the assignment from here so the new ones are not going to be added there anymore. Then let's create a new group for the designers and visit profile permissions. In the profile permission, start by removing all user-specific rights, because generally it's much better idea to manage groups than individual users. Then add those read and use rights for the designer group to that profile. There's no reason for giving designers more access, but a designer can also be in an admin group. Next, let's visit the database permissions. Again, remove user-specific permissions if any, then look at the designer group permissions. In my opinion, there is nothing here that a designer would need. Possibly manage dictionaries, but everything else is kind of admin or at least a lead designer thing. Now you can just move all users to the designers group. I have only one here, but the operation would obviously be the same if you had 50. And remember to also change the default group assignment for the new users. Next, make sure you are logged in as the actual admin user, because there is one thing the admin user cannot do that all the other admin group members can, and that is that it cannot remove rights from itself. So it's much safer to use for batch operations of changing access rights. So as that actual admin user, you can now go just and safely remove everyone from the admins group. Again, I just have one here, but it could be 50. So now you have a system that whenever you need, you can just easily disable access to the environment for individual users simply by removing them from designers group. Similarly, if you want to test new profile configurations, you can just export the profile, import it back, and only give access to that profile, for instance, to a new testing team group, stressing that they should be extra careful not to use that group in any production work. Now, unfortunately, you cannot control which profile is active for an entire group. So those testing users would have to choose that testing profile manually. But as a little trick, you can actually remove them from the designers group so they won't have access to the previously active production profile. So when they log in, CustomTools will prompt that they will have to select an active profile, and the only available one is the testing profile. By the way, it is not recommended to use multiple profiles actively. You will have issues, at least with projects and sequences, and those can only be fixed using quite complex SQL magic that is usually done by us. In case you have users you know that are never going to get back, you can also delete individual users. Still know that this will really not remove the user from the database, but it will be disabled. So a tech-savvy person capable of doing a little bit of SQL magic can actually undelete users. Talking about tech-savvy things, yet another perfect bridge to the next subject. Where should you install the database? Easy things first. If you have PDM Professional, then you also have at least the paid SQL Server Standard Edition, because that's the requirement of PDM Professional. Use it. There are no restrictions license-wise or anything else. It's faster, it's already being used by the same users, and even though PDM was there first, using it for custom tools also doesn't affect or touch PDM in any way. And most importantly, you have already paid for it. Okay, so if you have PDM Standard, that always uses SQL Server Express Edition. And Express Edition has those limitations that you might hit. So performance-wise, it's better idea to create separate instances so the limitations are not shared between PDM and custom tools. One doesn't affect the other. Geographically, use the same physical or virtual server than PDM uses, because if the server gives good performance for the designer, so will be the custom tools good performance. Because similar to PDM, custom tools is quite database intensive, meaning it talks with the database quite a lot. But we do have some improvements in the horizon regarding that. But anyway, the speed of the connection is almost irrelevant compared to the latency of the connection. Can you use cloud? Yes, as long as you solve the problem of how you share your files first. So opening SolidWorks files from a cloud-hosted network shared can be a very, very painful operation for the designers. So you need to make sure that aspect is covered first before introducing anything new to the mix, like custom tools. It definitely can work, and many people are using it, but in situations like very large assemblies or high network latency, you likely need a solution that replicates those files to the designer's local hard drives. And I would personally recommend PDM Standard in that case. Also, Dropbox can work, but it's far from a perfect solution and needs some special preparations and usage restrictions and things like that. Now that's out of the way. Azure SQL is not supported. However, Azure SQL managed instances are supported. Also, you can of course have a virtual machine on a cloud with SQL Server installed. And that even applies on Linux-based machines, as Microsoft SQL Server can also be installed on those. And it can be slightly cheaper, I think. So you are a freelancer. We do have a standalone installation, but it's just smoke and mirrors. The same server and database are required, but they are just installed locally and automatically, which also means that you can start as a local environment and later move your database into a shared environment if you get a team or something like that. And then for the global players, we do have multiple customers with multiple sites. But there is no one solution fits all. If you have this need, just contact our sales and we can discuss different options. Few more to go. Backing up. It is always important, and hopefully you understand why. But if you don't know how, then that's just kind of easily forgotten. But don't worry, we will get to that how very soon. Let's first understand indexing. It's when the database internally kind of rearranges itself so that it can respond to queries much faster, even regardless of having, let's say, millions of entries of data. But to do that, it first needs to have a little break. And it just cannot do it without getting some instructions first. How often it needs to be done? Well, that kind of depends on how much there is data. Ballpark, maybe once a month, once a year, something like that. So now let's take a look both backing up and rebuilding those indexes, how that can be done in practice. The paid SQL Server Standard Edition, by the way, has some tasks that you can use, but the free Express Edition does not. We have maintenance scripts that work in both. And here's how you can get it. Just log into the portal.customtools.info, and if you don't have an account, you can easily create one, but you will need your CustomTools serial number in that process. Go to Downloads, Utilities, and get CustomTools maintenance scripts. If you don't see it under Utilities, there might also be a tab called Other Downloads, and you should find it there. You will get a zip file with 2 SQL procedures. Using SQL Server Management Studio, log into the SQL Server as the system administrator. Note that SQL Server login is not the same as custom tool login. This login should be maintained by your IT. Or if, let's say, PDM reseller set it up, then they should know your SA account. Once in, open and run the express main.sql. This will add a new procedure to the SQL Server called dpo.expressmain. Then open the ct_backup.sql. This is an example and hopefully pretty clear as well. It first calls the procedure to create the backup, and then it shows how to call the same procedure to rebuild those indexes. The only thing you should change is the database name, the backup folder, and the report folder. Then you need to know about SQL command. If you have SQL Management Studio installed, then you should also have SQL command installed. It is a command line tool that can be used to call those maintenance procedures without opening SQL Management Studio. So it's just like you would run in the Windows command line like that. So now all you need to do is to utilize the Windows task scheduler and create, for instance, daily tasks for backup and monthly tasks for rebuilding those indexes, and you are all set. That's it. You should do it now. Phew. One more. Sessions table. It contains every single login of every single CustomTools user. The database's internal routines utilize this table quite extensively to check the session validity. So when it gets bigger and bigger and bigger over a long period of time, things just get slower and slower. The worst thing is that nothing cleans this table. As a general rule, never edit any database tables directly of CustomTools. CustomTools procedures and triggers are used extensively, and you can definitely put a table into a bad state if you start editing or deleting rows without using the procedures. But this table is special, so we can treat it a little bit specially as well. The table is called ct.db_session. First, select its content to investigate if there even is any problem. If you get thousands of rows, then it's a good idea to clean it up. And to clean it up, this will get rid of all of the old sessions that have already ended. Delete from, so on and so on, where is killed is one. Hooray! Now we know everything about everything. Tero, do we have any questions? If you have no questions at the moment, just contact us, and on behalf of the whole CustomTools team, thank you for joining, and have a nice day.
We are in the life-saving business. We kill your routines before they kill you.